You are lying on a rooftop in the summer heat, hands pressed over your eyes, and something sits down beside you. Not a person. Not a sound you can name. Something that belongs to the dark side of a question you should never have asked out loud. It places its hand on your arm. The hand is cold. Not cool. Not the chill of a breeze. Cold the way a stone pulled from deep water is cold. The kind of cold that has never known warmth. And it is so gentle. So unbearably gentle. Like it has been waiting a long time to touch someone again. You cannot move. You cannot speak. You can only lie there and feel it. And somewhere very close, close enough that you should be able to smell breath, close enough that you should be able to feel the weight of a body leaning over yours, something begins to cry. Not the way people cry. The way people cry when there is no one left to hear them. You are awake. You know you are awake. And that is the worst part of all of it. The house across the street had a history before anyone in the Calloway family moved in. But histories belong to other people until they don't. Ruby Calloway was 17 when her father finally bought the house on Mercer Lane in a small town called Hatchfield, tucked into the flat, heat-hammered stretch of central Georgia where summers last 9 months and everyone knows everyone's business except the parts that matter. Her father, a man named Carl who had worked double shifts at the grain elevator for 11 years to save what he needed, had wanted to own something. Not rent, not borrow, not lease. Own. Have a place where the Calloway name meant something in the ground beneath it. The house was small. 100-year-old two-story with a narrow front porch, a side yard, and an upstairs sleeping porch that caught whatever wind the Georgia evenings were willing to offer. Carl had it repainted, had new curtains hung, had the floors refinished until they shone like dark honey. When the family moved in, Carl, his wife Dina, Ruby, her brother Marcus, and her younger sister Lily. Neighbors came to stand on the porch and look around and say things like you've done something special with this place. Some of them smiled when they said it. Others looked at the house across the street. The house across the street had belonged to a family named Doyle. Everyone in Hatchfield knew the Doyle house the way you know a scar, not because you examine it constantly, but because your eye always finds it. There had been a daughter. Her name was Sable. She had been beautiful, people said, in the particular way that makes the people who remember it go quiet when they try to describe it. She had gone to a festival in town one August evening, hair loose, wearing something bright red, and come back different. Not sick, exactly. Not at first. She said something was following her. Something she could see that no one else could. A shape in the doorways. A face in the dark corner of her room. She said it was watching her. Within 3 weeks, Sable Doyle did not survive. Her father, a man named Robert, refused to accept it. He would stand at her grave for hours. He told people she was still somewhere, that she had only gone to a different side of something, not through it. He said there were ways to know. He poured water on the grave marker and watched the ground. The soil took the water immediately, completely, the way dry desert earth takes rain, as if there was nothing there at all, no body, no substance, as if something had already emptied out what was buried. Robert Doyle did not survive his grief by more than a year. After that, the Doyle matriarch remarried and eventually her oldest child's family moved away. The house was locked. That is when the house began to develop its reputation. Tenants came. Tenants left. Some stayed a week. Some couldn't finish a single night, loading their belongings by far prayer dawn light in the early morning, not explaining, barely answering questions, just leaving with the particular urgency of people who have decided that a deposit is not worth what they paid in other ways. When the neighbors asked what had happened, the stories were consistent enough to be disturbing. A girl, they said. In red. On the stairs. Near the doorways. She looked at the men longest. She got closer. And then she took hold. The Calloway family heard all of this in pieces over the first year. Carl dismissed it. Dina filed it. Ruby, who was 17 and had grown up reading everything she could find about things that existed in the margins of ordinary life, stored it somewhere between fascination and the particular unease that only comes from stories that are too specific to be invented. They lived across the street from it every single day. They saw it every morning. And for a long time, nothing. Then came a summer evening when Carl was out of town for work. Dina told the kids they'd sleep upstairs on the sleeping porch. It was too hot on the ground floor and the upstairs caught a breeze. Ruby took her math notebook and a pen and followed her mother up the stairs. Their heads, when they lay down, pointed toward the window that faced the street. Pointed toward the Doyle house. Ruby does not know why she did what she did next. She has tried for years to explain it. Not the act but the feeling that preceded it. The particular restlessness of a 17-year-old lying in the Georgia heat, summer pressing down like a hand, the old stories circling her mind. She looked up at the darkening ceiling and she said, in her heart, not aloud, barely even in words, if there is really something there, let me see it. She was not joking. She wasn't sure what she was doing. She put her hands over her eyes and lay still. She was completely awake. She needs you to know that. She has told this story for years, and the first thing she always says is, I was not asleep. I know the difference. First came wind. A strong pull of it, sudden, the kind that rises from nowhere in southern summers, and with it the sound of dried leaves on the porch floor stirring. Ruby felt a brief relief, the heat breaking, finally, and then beneath the sound of the leaves she heard something else. Footsteps. Not hurried. Not heavy. The slow, deliberate placement of feet that know exactly where they are walking. From the direction of the porch doorway. 3 steps. 4. They stopped directly beside her. She lay still. Told herself it was Dina getting up. Told herself it was Marcus. Told herself anything. Then something sat down beside her and placed its hand on her arm. The hand was cold. Not temperature. Cold in a way that bypassed temperature and went straight to something more fundamental, the cold of things that have been separated from warmth so long they have forgotten the concept. It was light. Softer than she expected. Almost tender. The hand of something that had once known how to comfort people and had not forgotten the shape of the gesture, even if everything else was gone. Ruby's breath stopped. The crying started seconds later. Not the crying of something in pain. The crying of something in grief so old and so complete that the sound had lost most of its human frequency. A sob that hiccuped and rose and fell in a register slightly wrong. Close enough to human to recognize, far enough from it to feel like the space between what you know and what you should never have asked to know. The voice was at her neck. As close as a person leaning over someone they love. She could not move. Not paralysis, not quite. She could feel everything, hear everything. She was entirely present, but her body had made a decision without her that some things are better survived by stillness. She lay under that cold hand for what she would later count as approximately 5 minutes. The crying did not stop. It did not vary. It went on and on with the patience of something that has no reason to hurry. Then it stopped. Ruby sat up. Her shirt was soaked through with sweat. She looked at the porch, at the doorway, at the sleeping form of her mother who had not stirred. She looked at the dried leaves in the corner that her family had swept into a pile and meant to throw away. They had not moved. If there had been wind strong enough to explain what she heard, those leaves would be scattered across the porch. They were exactly where her family had left them. She woke her mother. Could not speak. Could only pull at Dina's arm until she sat up, and then could only say, "Go downstairs, Mom, please, right now. We have to go downstairs." Nearly 1,000 miles away, in the same summer, in a different kind of darkness, a man named Marcus Webb was doing shift work in a city, coming home at 3 in the morning, and learning that spaces can hold things that have no business being held. Marcus Webb was 31, practical by training and necessity, A man who had grown up in a house where everything broken eventually got fixed and everything strange eventually got explained. He worked nights at a distribution facility outside Columbus, Ohio, and he lived in an apartment on the second floor of a complex on the east side with his sister Vanessa, her husband, and their kids. It was a crowded life. It was a good life. He had been happy there. The first time it happened, he almost convinced himself out of it. He came home at 3 in the morning, showered, came out into the living room to take a phone call so he wouldn't wake anyone. The living room was dark. He sat down on the floor near the window and called his friend back. The first 15 minutes were ordinary. Then something changed in the room the way pressure changes before a storm. A drop, a heaviness, a sense of the air thickening around him. Goosebumps up both arms at once. He shifted, told himself he was tired. Then he looked at the door. Something was standing above the door frame. Not in front of it, above it. So tall that the door frame ended at approximately its shoulders and only the upper portion of it was visible. A forehead and eyes. Looking at him. Not human eyes. Not inhuman in any way he could specify afterward. Just eyes in a place where eyes should not have been able to reach, watching him with a specific and unrushed attention of something that has all the time it needs. Marcus did not scream. He did not move. He sat perfectly still on the floor looking at him. Then it was gone. So quickly he could not track the absence. Just presence and then not presence. The space above the door frame empty again as if it had never held anything. He ended the call. Walked to his room without looking back. Lay down. Did not sleep. He told himself it was fatigue. 3 a.m. optics. The mind doing what minds do when they've been awake too long. He almost had himself convinced. Then 3 nights later, Vanessa's kids were home alone while Marcus and his sister went to the grocery store, and Marcus got a call 20 minutes in. Just come back. Come now. Please come back. No explanation. Just panic. When they returned, all the children were standing on the sidewalk in front of the building. Not inside, not upstairs, outside, in the night air, unwilling to go back in. The oldest, a 13-year-old girl named Kayla, pointed them to the living room. In the center of the floor was a study chair, steel-framed, thick wooden seat, the kind built to survive children, lying in pieces. Not tipped over. Broken. Snapped at the joints as if something with enough force and intention had decided it should not be whole anymore. No one had been in the room. The door had been locked from the inside when the kids had fled the apartment. There was no explanation for the force required to do what had been done to that chair. Marcus thought about the eyes above the door. He stopped thinking of it as fatigue. The Calloway house on Mercer Lane stayed unsettled. Not with events, exactly. Not with the constant dramatic intrusions that horror stories require. Something subtler. Something that lives in the in-between spaces of ordinary life. Ruby did not go upstairs for nearly 2 years after that night. She understood the Georgia heat, the load-shedding misery of summer evenings, the way the downstairs held the day's warmth like a brick oven. She understood all of it and still refused. She folded her hands when her parents asked her to come up. She cried. Once she woke in the night and had come downstairs in the dark and pressed herself against the wall in the front room and stayed there until morning rather than spend another night on that porch. Then came the second incident. A night when no one had gone upstairs. Too hot, nobody willing, and Ruby was lying in the downstairs room awake when she heard, from the upper floor, the specific sound of their staircase door. Every door in the Calloway house had a voice. This one had a particular squeak, a two-tone complaint that her father kept meaning to oil. She heard it open. She heard footsteps on the upper porch. Slow, unbothered footsteps. Not searching. Not stumbling. The footsteps of something that knew exactly where it was. She sat up in the dark and did not wake her mother because she was afraid of what she would say. "You're imagining things," Ruby, you're still thinking about that night, and lay there instead listening until the footsteps stopped and the silence came back thick and total. In the morning, the staircase door was open. Her mother said someone must not have latched it. Ruby knew it had been latched. She had checked it herself. Then Lily. Lily was 9 years old. She was sleeping in the middle of the night when she began to speak. Not the murmur of dream talk. Words. Clear words in a low voice that their mother heard from the next room and came to stand in the doorway listening to. The girl in red clothes is calling me. She says come. Their mother shook Lily awake. Lily's eyes stayed closed, but her face was wrong in a way Dina could not articulate. The expression too old, the muscles arranged in a pattern that did not match a child's face, a tone beneath her voice that had no business belonging to a 9-year-old. Then she went silent. In the morning she remembered nothing. Not a single word. Not a fragment of a dream. And then their father. Carl Calloway came home from a work trip and at breakfast, casually, as if asking whether someone had taken out the trash, said, "Did anybody go upstairs last night?" I heard the staircase door open. Dina looked at Ruby. Ruby went completely silent. Because she had heard it too. Months ago, the first time, had heard those footsteps, had lain awake all night, and Carl had not been home for any of it. Carl had not been told. Carl had no reason to describe a sound he had invented. He described it anyway. Accurately. The door. The footsteps. The slow, deliberate movement across the upper floor. That was the moment Ruby understood. Not fear, not a dream, not a misfire of a tired mind. Something had come from across the street. Something that had learned the Doyle house first and had since learned theirs. Something that knew the stairs and the porch and which room held the children. Something that had once, in the Georgia summer dark, been gentle enough to be called tender. And that was the worst part of it. Marcus Webb eventually left the apartment in Columbus. The reason he tells people is practical. Too crowded, better opportunity, ready for a change. The reason he tells himself in the dark is different. He moved his family, his sister, her husband, the kids, to a large villa rental outside the city. Old property. High ceilings. A walled yard. Enough space for children to run. The house had been vacant for years when they took it. Marcus could tell. The smell of closure, of long stillness, of rooms that had held nothing but their own air for a decade. He told himself, new space, fresh start, room to breathe. The renovation took weeks. During the day, with workers and noise and the constant percussion of construction, the house was just a house. At night, it became something with a different quality entirely. A heaviness. Not threatening exactly, at first. More like the feeling of a room where a conversation has recently ended and the people who were speaking have only just left. The sense of recently vacated space. Except that in this house the feeling persisted regardless of whether you had just arrived or had been there all day. Marcus slept late. Always had. The rest of his family were asleep by midnight. He'd often lie outside on a cot in the yard, phone in hand, the night air coming cool over the wall. It was on one of those nights, just past 2 in the morning, everyone else inside and asleep, that he first heard the whispers. Not quite words. The register and rhythm of an argument, of two people conducting a disagreement in hushed, urgent tones. But the actual content of it was just below audible, like a radio tuned almost to a frequency and picking up only the shape of what was being said. It seemed to come from inside the house. Marcus turned off his phone and listened. The sound moved, or his perception of it moved, as he followed it through the hallway, the main room, the back corridor. He chased it to the bathroom wall, where it seemed closest, then to the narrow passage behind the house. Then it stopped. Complete silence. The kind that presses. He stood in the dark passage telling himself to go back inside, and then behind him, from the direction he had come from, there was an enormous crash, metal on stone, the sound of something heavy and structural falling. He ran back through the house. He woke his friend. They checked every room, every corner. Nothing had fallen, nothing was displaced, no door was open, no surface disturbed. His friend said, "You were dreaming standing up." Marcus said nothing. The incidents in the villa accumulated the way water accumulates. Slowly, individually unremarkable, and then suddenly you are standing in something much deeper than you understood. Kitchen sounds at night, the soft collision of plates, the whisper of something moved along a rack and replaced. Footsteps on the roof, slow, considered, the steps of something that is not lost and not hurrying. A whistling outside the kitchen window before dawn, so close it sounded like someone standing a foot away, in an alley that opened to nothing. Then the night Marcus came home late from work at 3 in the morning and stood at his bathroom sink washing his hands and heard, from the other side of the room, a knocking. Not random, deliberate. The specific, measured knock of something announcing itself. Not trying to get in, not frantic, just communicating. I am here. I have always been here. I want you to know I am here. It came from the door that led to the interior staircase, a small door installed to keep the children from the roof. The knocking came from the other side of it. Not loud, unhurried. It went on for 10 minutes. Marcus stood with his hands wet over the sink, not moving, not calling out. He picked up his phone and recorded. He told himself every rational explanation. Old wood, temperature changes, rodents in the walls, and none of them held the shape of what he was hearing, which was not random and not mechanical but rhythmic, the rhythm of intention. He opened the bathroom door. The knocking stopped the instant he stepped out. Not faded, not slowed. Stopped. As if whatever was making it knew, precisely, that he had moved. He opened the small staircase door. He stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened. From the roof, very faint, the sound of something touching a surface. He made himself climb, one step at a time. He unlocked the roof door and pushed it open. A shadow crossed the far end of the terrace. Not the shadow of an object. Nothing was casting it. Not smoke, not mist, not any human shape. Just a movement, dark and fast and wrong, crossing the space from one side to the other and then gone. Marcus stood in the doorway and did not go forward and did not go back for a long moment that he has never been able to accurately count. Then from below him, from the veranda beneath the overhang, a crash. Something jumping, landing, deliberate. He turned and went back inside and locked every door behind him and lay in his room until morning. He tells people about 3 moments most often. The eyes above the door frame in Columbus, looking down at him with the patience of something that does not need to blink. The children's battery-dead motorcycle in the dark hallway, engine running, lights burning, running without the battery that had been removed a week before, and when he turned it off it would not turn on again, as if whatever had been running it had already left. And the shadow on the roof of the villa, moving faster than wind, gone before he could give it a shape. What those 3 moments had in common, he says, was certainty. Not fear, exactly. Not panic. Certainty. The absolute, irreducible knowledge that he was not alone. There is a theory about houses, not a scientific one, not one you'll find in any textbook, that says some places learn the people who live in them. Not memorize them, not record them. Learn them. The way you learn a song until you can hear it even in silence. Ruby Calloway no longer lives on Mercer Lane. The house on Mercer Lane still stands. The Doyle house across the street still stands. Whether whatever crossed that street in the Georgia summer heat is still moving through those rooms, she cannot say. What she can say is this: she was awake. She knows what sleep feels like, and she knows what that night felt like, and they are not the same thing. She felt that hand. She heard that crying. And years later, in the complete quiet of her own life, in a house she chose carefully in a town far from Hatchfield, She still sometimes feels the ghost of that cold on her forearm. Not a memory. A presence. A thing that decided once to reach for her and never entirely let go. Marcus Webb still lives in the villa. He is still there. He reads certain verses to himself before he enters rooms at night. He no longer goes to the roof alone after midnight. He has not seen the shadow again, not clearly, not the way it moved across the terrace that first time. But he does not believe it has gone. He believes it has become accustomed to the new arrangement. That somewhere in the arithmetic of whatever that house contains, a negotiation has been reached. You stay in your rooms, I will stay in mine. He is not certain the arrangement will hold. What does it mean, a cold hand in the dark? A shadow that moves without a body? A motorcycle running without a battery? A little girl speaking in her sleep in a voice that does not belong to her age? It might mean nothing. It might mean that the universe contains more rooms than we have found doors to, and that sometimes something on the other side of a wall we don't know exists learns to knock. Or it might mean exactly what Ruby and Marcus both arrived at, separately, in different states, in different decades, having never met and never spoken. That some things do not leave. They do not pass on or move forward or resolve. They remain. In the staircase, on the porch, above the door frame, on the roof in the dark, patient in the way that only things without clocks can be patient, waiting for someone to lie down with their hands over their eyes and ask, half out of spite and half out of need, the question that has no safe answer. If there is really something there, let me see it. Be very careful what you ask the dark to confirm.